Hey everybody, welcome to Top 10 Thursday on the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and this week is part 2 of the Shadows over Innistrad special. We're a few months away from it, but I thought I'd do some lists anyways. This is the top 10 cards that I don't want to see reprinted in Shadows over Innistrad block, Shadows over Innistrad, and whatever the second set will be called. So last week, of course, I did the 10 cards that I wanted to see reprinted. Some notable cards not included in there for some reason. Maybe they might be on this list, who knows? Yeah, this is going to be the top 10 cards that I don't want to see reprinted. Now, a little bit weirdly, a number of these are going to be because of Standard and Constructed. I don't really talk about Constructed. I don't play Constructed all that much. I'm a very limited player, kind of first and foremost. I love Draft and I love Sealed. I'll play Standard here and there, but it's not my kind of go-to format. But a number of these cards I don't want to see because of how much they would destroy Standard. I don't play Standard too much right now. If these cards came back, I wouldn't touch it for a year, or I guess half a year. No, it would take a full year for those to rotate, so yes, I wouldn't touch Standard for a year, guaranteed. But starting right away at number 10, we've got Strom Kirk Noble. Strom Kirk Noble was a very aggressive card. It was a 1/1 for 1, which normally we don't play, but every single time it hits your opponent, it gets a +1/+1 counter. It's a 2/2, it's a 3/3, it's a 4/4, and it can't be blocked a lot of the time. So this thing was very hard to deal with. At least in Innistrad, we had some things like not Geist Flame, and other still cheapish removal. We weren't out of the Doomblade era yet. There were ways to kill this thing. In today's kind of cheap removal doesn't exist world, Strom Kirk Noble would probably be pretty invincible. Now, of course, they would hopefully print stuff to handle it, but who knows what would happen. But I'd be okay not to see Strom Kirk Noble back as far as limited has to go. At least it was a rare, so you didn't see it too often, but when you did, it was a little bit of a beatdown, so I'll be happy not to see it again. At number 9, we've got Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. It's a mythic, so it wasn't terribly common. Obviously not common, it was mythic, to see this in a draft. But when you saw this in a draft, it was a beating. 4 mana for a 4/1 hasty flyer is gross. Right then and there, that enough is gross. Thankfully, it's 2 colors to cast it, but still, gross. The fact that it can become indestructible basically on demand, assuming you have any other creatures, and if you have token producers, then wow. And the fact that it can get bigger if you're feeding it humans is just crazy. It also helped fuel a relatively oppressive deck. There were more oppressive decks during the Innistrad era of Standard, but it fueled the Aristocrats, a deck that did quite well. I feel like it won a Pro Tour or 2. It was a solid deck, and it was partly on the back of Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. Very solid card, mildly format warping in Standard, a pain in the ass to deal with in Limited. I'd be happy not to see it back. Number 8, we go from vampires to angels. We've got Restoration Angel. This is way too good with Enter the Battlefield effects. This is a card that they basically have to think about every Enter the Battlefield effect that they ever produce ever again because Restoration Angel exists. Now, thankfully, as far as Standard goes, when Shadows comes out, Siege Rhino will be gone because Restoration with Siege Rhino would be a little bit... there's not even a word in the English language to describe how terrible it would be. Now in Limited, Restoration Angel's not as bad because you can try to build around your Enter the Battlefield effects, but really you're going to get one Restoration Angel, so you're going to get one chance to do it. In Constructed, where you're going to have a playset of them and a playset of the targets that you want to hit. Thragtusk, of course, was Restoration Angel's best friend for a long time. It can get a little bit crazy. But yeah, I would be happy not to see Restoration Angel again, just because of what it does to Constructed. Limited, not too bad, but it can stay back in the vaults. Next up at number 7, we've got Hellrider. Another super powerful 4-mana card, just like Falcon Wrath Aristocrats. In a low curve, flood the board style of deck, this thing was just insane. You might think that you were a little bit behind. You know, your opponent had 3 or 4 creatures on board and you had maybe 1 or 2, but you had time, right? And then this comes down, and suddenly you're just getting hit for way more damage than you ever expected. It's almost kind of like a red version of Overrun, and Overrun, of course, is a tough card to deal with. It comes out of nowhere and just lose. It basically says on the card, you lose. You're just done. And Hellrider was kind of in the same boat. Now, you could still potentially kill Hellrider before it did too much damage, or maybe if you were really lucky, lightning bolted or whatever the card was at that time. I can't remember what the 3 damage spell was there, but I don't think we even really have a 3 damage instant speed spell after Searing Spear went away. But yeah, it's hard to deal with. It's like the red overrun. I'd be okay to have something not as crazy as Hellrider reprinted. Next up at number 6, we have a big one, and it's a common, Delvar of Secrets. Delvar of Secrets was one of the cards from one of the most oppressive decks that I've ever experienced since I've come back to Magic. I came back with Innistrad, so I wasn't around for Cawblade, I wasn't around for Jace the Mind Sculptor, but I was around for Delvar. I was around for the summer where Delvar was something like 40% of the decks being played in standard tournaments. You basically had to play Delvar or you were dumb. And Delvar wasn't solely the reason. A Delvar, of course, requires Ponder or something to help you set up those draws so that you know you're going to flip your Ponder or your Delvar on turn 2 and start hitting for 3 in the air. Without Ponder, maybe it wouldn't be as bad, but we do have Scry as an evergreen keyword, meaning that it's going to appear in every set now. So I still see Delvar just being way too powerful. Turn 2 is not where we should be having 3/2 flyers. Not in Limited, not in Constructed. So I'd be happy to see Delvar just kind of fade away into history. Next up at number 5, we have a card that isn't oppressive. I don't hate seeing it on the other side of the battlefield. It's not even good. It's Archangels Light. Archangels Light, I don't ever want to see printed again. And it's a famous failure of Wizards. If you don't know the story of Archangels Light, basically in Avacyn Restored, or was it Dark Ascension? Whatever set it was in, there was a mythic that was too good. They tested it, and they said, whoa, this is too good. We need something else instead of this mythic. They've never said what it was exactly. Who knows if we've seen a fixed version of it or not. But they said, hey, we need another card. And it was relatively late in the development cycle. And so they knew that they couldn't put in a really good card because they wouldn't have time to test it. And maybe it was too good. Maybe it would have been broken and they wouldn't have figured it out. So they kind of erred on the side of caution. And they went with Archangels Light, which was terrible, and they knew it was not great, but they didn't have time to test it, so they wanted to err on the side of being not good, and it was abysmal. It was just a bad card. It never saw play. I mean, it was last pick in draft, and it took up a mythic slot. The mythics, which are supposed to be the flashy cards, the storyline cards, the cool cards. It was just a garbage card. It was terrible. For those reasons, I would like to never see this card ever again. It's clear it wasn't tested or optimized. They've admitted that, and I hope we don't see it again. Next up at number 4, we have another 4 mana cost creature that's kind of oppressive and kind of hard to deal with. We have Olivia Voldaren. Olivia feels so bad to see on the other side of the battlefield. Any of your X1s that you have, they're dead. 2 mana, ping, they're dead. Combat math gets super screwy because Olivia might be getting bigger. Who knows how big she's going to get? It may, kill off your creatures before they can attack. It may finish them off after combat. There's so many things that you have to think about. The board, the combat gets so much more complex. It's so hard to deal with. And not only that, if Olivia survives into the late game, and at this point she's probably disgustingly large, she's just going to start stealing all of your creatures. She'll ping a creature, turn it into a vampire, and take it. It's just your opponent's. It's no longer yours. It's gone. And all that for 4 mana. All that for 2 black-red, the exact same casting cost as Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. And of course she flies, because why not? Because we need that. Olivia is super powerful. She's pretty much the definition of a mythic. She's pretty darn powerful, very splashy, complex effects, and a legendary character. But I feel like she's just a bit too good to get reprinted. Maybe we'll see like a 5 mana version of her that does something similar, but I don't want to see the original incarnation of her back again. Next up at number 3, we have probably the most controversial card. On my list anyways, Snapcaster Mage. I don't want to see this card back. Just no. I don't remember exactly if Wizards has admitted it. If they haven't, they've at least strongly hinted that Snapcaster was a flat, out broken mistake. They didn't realize just what it did and just how powerful it was and just how it interacted with things, and it was a total mistake, and they would never do it again. Now, this is controversial, of course, because a lot of people want Snapcaster reprinted. But that want tends to, from my experience from Reddit threads and things like that, it tends to come from a place of, I don't have these cards and I want them, therefore it should be reprinted. It doesn't take into account the quality of the draft format. It doesn't take into account what it would do to standard. It's purely a sort of greedy, I want this card, sort of desire to reprint it. And I don't fall in for that. I want a really good draft set. I want a set that's going to be fun to draft. It's not going to screw up Constructed or things like that. And Snapcaster Mage being included would. It's not too bad in the draft format because you're going to get one at most. You're not going to get two of these almost ever. And it is still really good in Limited. Even with just one, it's still really good. But in Constructed, it just ruins things. It just ruins things. And I expect this card, at some point, in some format, to get put on the ban list. I definitely expect that to happen. And I hope that I'm smart enough to sell my playset off before that happens. But I probably won't be, because I'm a hoarder. I'm a collector. I don't really sell my cards too much. So I'll probably miss that boat. But I fully expect it to end up on a ban list at some point. And I never want to see it be reprinted in a live set. I'm totally fine with cards being reprinted in supplemental sets. I would be fine with Snapcaster in a commander deck. Or in Plane Chase. Plane Chase? Plane Shift? Plane Chase. I'd be fine with it in anything like that. But in a live draft format that we're going to be drafting for months, that's going to affect Constructed, that's going to affect Standard, I don't want to see cards like this reprinted. So Snapcaster number 3, don't do it. Next up at number 2, we've got Geist of Sainttrapped. You know what's gross? Hexproof. You know what's worse? Hexproof on a 3-drop. You know what's even worse than that? Hexproof on a 3-drop that swings in for 6. Geist of Sainttrapped is ridiculous. I can't even begin to imagine what Wizards was thinking when they designed this card. How they didn't notice that a 2/2 with Hexproof for 3 that made a 4/4 Flying Angel when it attacked was a little bit of a problem. Little bit of a problem. Yes, you can block Geist of Sainttrapped, assuming it's not, an aura put on it, such as the Bant Hexproof was fond of doing. That deck was around for quite some time, and I hated that deck. Assuming it doesn't have equipment on it, assuming it has nothing like that, you can block it and kill it. You're still going to get hit in the air for 4, at least once, if not multiple times. And yeah, maybe you can edict it away, force your opponent to sacrifice it. Maybe you can deal 2 damage to it somehow by dealing 2 to the team. But beyond those cases, this card is just oppressive. Thankfully, it's mythic, so you're going to see this, once every 8 or 9 drafts. So it's not a huge deal in Limited, but in Constructed, it's just disgusting. And even in Limited, I don't like Hexproof. It's non-interactive. It really encourages games where you just don't get to do anything. You just get to sit there and just get hit over and over and over, and I don't like that. Luckily, they are moving away from Hexproof. Hexproof these days is really expensive. Plated Colossus, I think it was called, in Battle for Zendikar. The one that's 4 green. Really hard to cast, really expensive for just a trample hexproof big thing. You don't get these tiny little super powerful hexproof creatures that much anymore, and that's an explicitly sort of stated mission statement from Wizards. They don't do that anymore, and I'm glad of that. So I don't think we'll see Geist of Sainttrapped back, but just in case, it's number 2 on my list. Finally, at number 1, we have another hexproof creature. We have Invisible Stalker. Invisible Stalker wasn't as crazy as Geist of Sainttrapped. It wasn't a 2/2. It wasn't something that made 4/4 Flying Angels every single time it attacked, but it was unblockable. Which meant that you could throw any aura you wanted onto it, because hey, how was it going to die? The only way it was going to die was if you got Edict somehow. You had to sacrifice a creature, and you had nothing else on the board to sacrifice. If you had anything else, you sacrifice that, and you keep your Invisible Stalker that has 2 Spectral Flights on it and a Silver Inlaid Dagger and a Butcher's Cleaver. Because why not? It was a disgusting card, and it was uncommon. There was one of these at least in every draft almost, sometimes more. And there were really bad common auras and mediocre to good equipments, especially the equipments that interacted with humans, and Invisible Stalker's a human, that just made Invisible Stalker insane. It was really tough to deal with in draft because, of course, only the black player was going to have a way to handle it if they had Tribute to Hunger, and only if your opponent's board was empty. There was a couple of red ways to deal with it by dealing damage to a bunch of things. If you really wanted to dig for it, you could try to go green and naturalize off the equipment and auras, but that's a long, weird way to go, playing cards that otherwise wouldn't be any good at all. It was just a crazy card, and I'm certain Wizards has said that they kind of screwed up on having this card exist. And of course, not only that, it was part of the Bant Hexproof deck. This plus Geist plus whatever auras they could jam in was a really, really good and somewhat oppressive deck. It wasn't as oppressive as Delvar, but it felt bad to play against it. And for that reason, I don't ever want to see Invisible Stalker ever again. That's going to wrap it up for the top 10 cards that I don't want to see reprinted in Shadows over Innistrad for limited and or constructed reasons. Let me know in the comments right down there what you don't want to see reprinted in Shadows over Innistrad. If you didn't let me know what you want to see reprinted last week, definitely let me know that as well in the comments below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/TheManaLeak. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got the comment section down below, as I just said. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all next time.